Okay, it's 5. I'll call the May 6th Select Board meeting to order. As a preliminary matter, I, Don Holgate, Chair of the Nantucket Select Board, will confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. I will first go through the Select Board members in the order in which I see you. Matt Fee, Jason Bridges, Christy Ferrantella, Rita Higgins.
Is Linda still here? Oh, they can't get in.
I will also go through the staff members that are on. Erica Mooney.
Here.
Libby Gibson.
Present.
Paul Murphy.
Present.
Leslie Snell.
Present.
William Pittman.
Here.
Brian Turbot.
Present.
Jeff Carlson.
Evening.
Roberto Santamaria.
Present.
Wait a minute. I think I am.
Amy Baxter. You guys are changing your order on me by turning your cameras on and off.
Present.
Greg Tivnan.
Present.
And then we also have Martha Turk on. Hi, Martha.
Yes. Hi.
We have Wendy Hudson on. Greg Corbo from Town Council.
Present.
Dr. Diane Pearl.
Present. Hello.
Hi. And then I will go to Steve Visco, Chairman of the Board of Health, to do a roll call on his board members.
Thank you. This is also the joint meeting with the Select Board Wednesday, May 6th, by roll call vote for attendance. Malcolm McNabb.
Here.
Jim Cooper.
Here.
Colleen Weld.
Here.
Rita Higgins.
Here.
She's here again. So I'll turn it back over to Dawn.
Okay, so we are conducting a remote meeting, which is consistent with Governor Baker's executive order 2020 due to the current state of emergency of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate transmission, we've been authorized to suspend public gatherings, and as such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to be in a publicly accessible physical location. Furthermore, all members of these public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order you'll find posted with the agenda materials, along with all of our other agenda materials. We will be allowing public access via a YouTube link at regular intervals throughout our meeting. We will let you know when it's on. You will have to refresh. We're using the Zoom platform for this meeting. Meeting materials are in our packet or may be posted on the screen at points during the meeting. Please raise your hand so that the chair can recognize you, or the chair will recognize you as we get to that point in the agenda. If you, please refrain from sharing your screen as it could be publicly recorded. And I think that is all the main points. So we will accept the agenda as written. We are being audio and video recorded. I would suggest that public comment be turned on at this stage to start receiving them as we continue with our discussion. Are there any opening select board comments?
Dawn, did you do the announcements? The census and the committees?
Oh, sorry. Martha, did you want to speak on the census as that announcement? Give us an update.
Okay, thanks for asking me to come. The current overall response rate for Nantucket is just a little over 21% as of this afternoon. In Massachusetts, it's almost 60%, which is a little bit above what the national average national response rate is, almost 57%. There are 6 census tracts on Nantucket that have a real disparity in terms of response rate. The Mid-Island, Cisco, Airport, Surfside, Myakomet areas are all somewhere around in the 30s in terms of response rate, which is great. But there are lots of, there are some really low numbers in Sconset, Tom Nevers, Quidnet, Wawinnet, Pulpus, that way, at 8.4%, and in Nantucket at 11.6%, and actually in town at just a little over 13%. And we know the response rate is going to be suppressed because there are a lot of vacant seasonal homes that are part of the denominator when figuring that out. So one of the things that we're doing is through the Civic League, we're working to encourage seasonal residents to respond, even if their homes are vacant, to help bump up the rate. But really what we need to know is how many people we have on Nantucket, and the response rate is just one means of measuring that may not be accurate. And both the Vineyard and the Cape are experiencing similar issues. There are several COVID-related changes to the Census Bureau's operational calendar. So the response deadline has been changed from the original July 31 to October 31. The hand delivery of census forms to areas that don't receive mail carrier delivery was supposed to take place in April, and now it will not take place until June. Again, that's assuming we have no further pandemic-related changes coming our way. And then census takers who were scheduled to follow up with people who had not responded either online or with an initial paper form mailing were originally supposed to be out beginning in early May, and now that will be sometime in June. So we're kind of working on figuring out how to keep the momentum going, how to make it better with an additional 4 months, and all of the other pressing matters and concerns that are on people's minds. So what we've been doing recently, thank you to the select board, is we have had flyers at both Stop and Shop locations, thanks to Ted Miller from the Mid-Island store. Mark Willett has arranged to have a message on all of the Wattacomet bills for May and June, urging everybody, whether they're here or not, to complete the census. We have a message, I think still, I'm actually not on the island right now, but on the sign at the Rotary, so thanks to the police department for that. I've been working with Jason to feed him some information so he has it at hand during his Facebook and Instagram live meetings, which has been great. The public schools have sent emails to families in a variety of language with all of the appropriate links and dedicated phone numbers for all of those languages. We have some partnerships with the participants in the Community Foundation's Food Initiative to put these multi-language flyers that have been at the grocery store into meals. So I want to thank Charlie Noble, the Culinary Institute Fairgrounds, or the Whale and the Sandbar for help with that. The Food Pantry and the Food, Fuel, and Rental Assistance Program are also distributing those multi-language flyers, as well as the Meals on Wheels program. So that's really helpful. We have an increased social media presence, both through the town's pages, thanks to Florencia, and the Community Foundation's Facebook page has had some posts. Recently, I created a video with the help of 5 local film stars, and that's the most recent post that you'll see on the town's social media pages. So please share that. I appreciate that the town posts are also in Spanish. That's obviously a huge part of our population that we need to be reaching. I also want to tell you that the Secretary of the Commonwealth's office um, actually took my suggestion to heart that they do a mailing to the low response areas on the Cape and Islands because they are particularly concerned. And so they are in the process of doing that. I think it will probably go just to post office box holders. I'm not sure, and I'll be providing support for that when it's ready. So the key messages basically are: the census is easy, it's confidential, responses cannot be shared per federal law. Takes 10 minutes. There are 10 questions. The statistics are what's important, and for every person that's counted now, about $2,400 per year will come to Nantucket every year for the next 10 years. The census is more important than ever because funding will help stimulate economic recovery, sort of post-pandemic. And our slogan has been that we all count for Nantucket, so get counted. You don't need a form. You can use your residential address to complete the census at 2020census.gov. Happy to take any questions you might have.
Does anybody have anything for Martha? That was pretty comprehensive. And get out and do the census, everybody. 2020 committee, board, commission vacancies. I think that those have all been advertised and those appointments are made in June. The information's in our packet as well. COVID-19 weekly update. We do, this is when we could take any opening comments from the board, or I think that some public comments might have come in. I can read them. Not, okay, there's 3 questions from Thomas Garada. If a renter goes to hospital and gets a positive test result or is to self-quarantine, is the town board of health make them stay beyond the rental period contracted? Will they be allowed to leave the island? If they are not allowed to leave, are they confined to the rental property by order of the town of Nantucket Board of Health? So at whose expense, and if other tenants are to move in, who will provide accommodations for them? So those are a lot of questions that are not really on the agenda right now, but maybe we can take those in. Oh, Libby?
I was just going to say, this question's come up quite a few times. Well, maybe not quite a few times, but we've heard it several times in the last couple of weeks. And I don't know if we've had a significant chance to really discuss it with town council at all. Roberto can say if he has been able to do that. But Greg, do you have any idea? It was seeming to us that the answer to this is emerging, and it wasn't really crystal clear at this point, but we were going to ask you anyway, so sorry.
That's okay. Thank you, Libby. No, I have not had an opportunity to look into this specific question. Certainly, the Board of Health has the authority to issue an order that someone quarantine or isolate in a particular place. And when people test positive, they're supposed to be monitored for symptoms and things like that. But this issue of where exactly they're supposed to be while they're renting is not one that we've looked at, but I can certainly look into it further and report back to the board.
Thanks, Greg. Then we have just a comment. Emily Lemus, please let the hardscape to work and at least 2 per job. So we do have Wendy Hudson on. I'd like to go to her before we get to the next part, so that she can jump off, but she might have an update on what the state is thinking.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and greetings, everyone. Thank you again for everything you guys are all doing. I know I'm spending a lot more time on Zoom than ever in my life. We've had a very robust week since we last spoke, of more industry trade groups coming before, we were at 23 on Sunday and I've lost track by now, and there's another whole fleet of them coming. Some definite trends are, in comments are emerging. Before I forget, I can speak to the fact that short-term rental question is definitely big, the lodging association, hotels, everybody has the same issue. Like, what happens if somebody falls sick on your watch or in your property? It's a really, that's one of the really tricky ones for sure. The main message, and I'm trying to subtly, just kind of reinforce the fact that this is going to be a plan coming out. Then it's going to be very phased and very slower than maybe some in the community would like, and probably some things will be faster than some people would like as well. But with the infection rates still high, the health risk is still prominently on the minds of everyone on that committee and in the office. A few different trends for sure that, like, before the economy can really get back going, the three really big enablers they talk about a lot are childcare, which remains a big question. There's not great guidelines around how that will work, especially off island. The need for that to be a more flexible day than it's typically been, as so much staggered work happens, which I think will affect us here as well. The need for reliably a good source of PPE, of sanitation, before regulations go into effect that are going to require every place to clean more than usual, et cetera, as we want to. There's still not great supply. You can't get Clorox wipes, for example, that kind of thing, or masks, or face coverings that used to cost 5 cents for restaurants, or 65. I heard from a restaurateur today, and what I was able to buy was twice that easily. Transportation is another really big thing, Commonwealth wide. The NRTA here has been great, and I know that's going well for us. But so those are really big things, and the desire is absolutely to not piecemeal this. So we won't be seeing, I don't expect regional differences from what I'm gathering so far. We had Linda Markham is on this committee as well, the president of Cape Air. She and I were on a call with the regional delegation the other day, our representatives, et cetera. And, we were hearing loud and clear, and I was saying loud and clear that the frustration with this short season coming, and just the economic impacts are going to be devastating. So I take that urgency, but at the same time, it's going to be a statewide thing. What I'm thinking of there is the curbside, and we can certainly, I expect questions, and I'd be happy to answer that kind of thing with you guys. But I don't think we can hope for a lot of movement before the entire Commonwealth is ready to go at the same time. And that makes sense in some ways, so that some towns aren't opening before others, and it puts pressure, et cetera. What am I forgetting? I guess one of the most important things we can absolutely stress is the hope at the highest level and the lowest level, that the new rule for face coverings, if followed, will be hugely impactful. It has an entire, there's all kinds of science behind it. I'm sure, our health department people can all speak to this, what they've seen. But I think what we need to impress upon the public is just please cooperate with that, and it will enhance our chances of getting back to our new normal as fast as possible and slow the rate. Like, testing would be great, but it's way off. Face coverings we can do, and it's effective. So as much of it as it's annoying, that's what we all need to be cooperating with. And I hope the social pressure does not become politicized. I hope that people really see the wisdom of that they'd rather wear a mask and be a little bit hot than stuck at home for another several months. So I guess with that, I will absolutely be happy to take questions from you guys.
Does anybody have questions? Jason?
You might have said this, Wendy. What are the 1 or 2 or 3 themes that you're seeing across the board from all the different sectors? Is there anything that stands out?
Those main things, the childcare, PPE, and transportation. PPE, I can say a little bit more about. Like, every single industry group is begging the Commonwealth to play a role in it, not necessarily supplying directly, but providing some sort of a clearinghouse for. I think Rhode Island has a Masks Rhode Island website or something, so they're helping pair the need. So that I think the healthcare is a separate section. I think from what I've heard, but like at least for small businesses and maybe mask producers or people that are doing, slightly more important work can get that, or that there's an equitable distribution, across different types of small business, et cetera. One thing I did want to mention, I think anybody listening might be really interested in looking at the guidance coming out of the state of Ohio. There's been a lot of positive kind of comments, among the BCG people that are working with the Commonwealth, et cetera. I printed out one just to show you. This is the retail guidance for Ohio, and this is sort of the format that I think we can expect from the state. That has the mandatory thing, it's like employees, customers, and guests, physical spaces, and what to do if somebody's sick. So we all take this structure, and then it has some recommended best practices. So you must do these if you can do these, and it's pretty good. I think it goes by industry. So I think when we are done, like what you'll see is going to be along that line.
Matt?
Yeah, Wendy, you were saying the government's gonna wait till sort of the whole state itself is all in pretty good shape. And I wonder, how is that gonna work when sort of, my understanding is sort of the central state, sort of Holyoke, some of those areas are starting now. Barnstable is sort of ramping up a little now. How will they determine what, and we haven't even had our surge yet, potentially. How are they going to determine the state as a whole is safe?
It will be numbers driven by the rate. I think they're working on that still. It's not totally set. It might be a metric of hospital capacity. I leave this to smarter people than me, but that coupled with, there's a big push sort of for a regional thing, like, well, they're doing fine here, Nantucket open, I guess it's really particularly that curbside issue. And I went to bat for that today at the group, I knew what the answer was going to be, but I knew I was going to be talking to this group and the public. And I have to do my job and say, can we treat, businesses equally? Because I really take it as sort of a preferential class of business, like the big stores are getting all the business, they get to be open, whatever. We don't, and small stores, by we. And I just got shut down really quick on that. So as far as other things opening, I don't think they should. So I think, I don't know exactly what you've seen, Matt, but we did hear, Linda was saying that, some hotels are saying they're going to open on the 18th, and she brought that to the group, and they were like, oh, they shouldn't expect to be able to do that. So it's bad news all around, but that's where it's at. So did I answer sort of?
Thanks, Wendy. Christy, I think, has a question too.
Yeah, just kind of based on what you were just saying. So the report coming out May 18th, do you think it's going to be a bunch of phases? So kind of what phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 will be, and then that will be kind of that slow transition?
Yes, I absolutely think I know that's what it will be. And the pace at which phase 1 can go to phase 2 will be what I just, referred to with the metrics of health and et cetera. Hopefully, like I say, we really are counting on hoping for good news, I guess I should say, not counting on, but that the mask wearing, the effective social distancing, complete, hyper vigilance on the part of the public, we hope will have, the desired impact, and we'll let things get open. I say we. I had one other thought related to the phases. I think there's also just a lot of looking right now at what the other states that really are opening and what's happening, how that comes out, how that turns out for them. So.
Thank you. If anyone on the Board of Health has a question for Wendy, I think that this helps inform all of your discussions as well. Feel free. But I think that was a lot of really good information about what our expectations will be.
Yeah, I welcome. We are all, moving so fast and on the phones all day, et cetera. I welcome reaching out to me. I think maybe texting might be the best way because it's easy to text, and so my cell is pretty much widely findable on wherever. But please don't hesitate to reach out. And if you have reached out and I haven't gotten back to you, I apologize. But do our best.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And you don't have to stay on, or you're welcome to if you want to.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. We do have Dr. Pearl here with maybe any updates from the hospital before we get into our additional discussion.
Hello, thank you. I have only a short report. There has not been much change since last week. We have tested 350 people through our drive-through screening site. We have had a little uptick since the testing capacity, or since the testing criteria have expanded to include all age groups and no need for previous illness, and still require symptoms, however. And we have now 13 positive cases on Nantucket. We're working hard still to prepare for a surge, which we hope never shows up because of this flattening of the curve. And since the adoption of the strategies that Wendy was talking about, and which you all know about masking for everyone who can't maintain a significant distance from each other, and hand washing, and other strategies, we hope that we will not get a surge because those have been found to be very effective strategies, as Wendy noted. And I'm sure that Governor Baker is using that very, very as a central information to what to do next. And he's been very conservative thus far with our Commonwealth, and we've been very hard hit. But things are turning around quite a bit, and we're going to watch very carefully. And every time we have a positive test, as you know, and Roberto knows, we're looking at that carefully. Was it from the community? Was it from somebody in a work area? All of that tracing is really critical to keep this infection from surging on this island. I'm happy to answer questions, Dawn.
There is one question from Jeff Chatting that he submitted.
Mm-hmm.
With commercially available antibody testing coming to market, Quest Diagnostics, can those tests be done at NCH?
Those tests are available, I think, to purchase potentially either from Quest or from Amazon or something. They are not available here at the Cottage Hospital. Mass General is working on their own antibody test, but the quality and the validity of these tests is quite questionable. So we're waiting for one from Mass General to be perfected.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. Any questions from anyone else? Okay. Thank you very much. Now back to emergency orders. I believe that the Board of Health just had some discussion. We're generally focusing, or we are completely focusing on the only 2 areas where Nantucket put in some more restrictive measures than the rest of the state. And we've been exploring an expansion of some of the things to be allowed that are actually still quite a bit more restrictive than the state for both landscaping and construction. There's definitely been some discussion that a lot of people are out of work, and there's a lot of stuff that's been left undone that's hazardous. And I would probably look to Steve to recap their discussion and where things are going, or ask any additional questions of Plus, Natural Resources, Town Council. I just want the board to give some clear direction to the community on these 2 areas. Everything else at the moment is governed under the state orders, and as Wendy just mentioned, that guidance will be coming down the line. Steve?
I think on the construction part, the couple biggest points were some wording in the allowable construction, and what are we going to have for a number of people on job site, and then a little bit about implementation date, whether we move right away or we take some time to see how things progress with any more cases. Those were the couple things that were mostly talked about. And on the landscaping one, there was just a couple discussions on, which Jeff brought up with the size of the lot and the number of people, but not really much on his end. It seemed to be pretty good.
So where does that leave us? And I mean, does our board have questions about the status? Matt?
Yeah, I missed the meeting. So could someone, I know that there was a presentation, it was supposed to be a presentation on sort of pandemic, a report on pandemic modeling and that type of thing. How did that go, Stephen?
I'll turn that over to Roberto. He can fill you in on that. I probably wouldn't remember all the detail that he said. Roberto?
Basically, what really came out of that was we got information out to the board. It was kind of decided that the information, though it's good and it's good as a tool to be used, it is also, once again, a tool that's just going to be looked at. I think it went well. I think the board accepted the information that we needed to accept, and we took out of that what we needed to take out. And I think we can move forward with decisioning. What we did find is that, and I know there's always questions coming out of since we opened or since phase one started, how many cases were attributed and things like that. So real quick, a quick recap on that is that we have 13 cases on the island since phase one started. There were 3 more cases. And then in total, because when the information is less than 5, we can't necessarily release too much identifiable information. But 1/3 of all the cases are laborers. More than half of the cases are Hispanic. And then we're still waiting for the information from the state. I don't know if they have information on the people's, whether they're construction, landscaping, or anything like that, but they do have basic demographic information. So I put in a request to the epidemiologist's office, but it might be a bit before we get it. And then that was basically it. I can put the PowerPoint up. It was really quick.
So that the seven of the people on Nantucket were in front of the Hispanic demographic?
Yes, I accidentally released the number, but yes.
Yeah. Do we know if these were attributed to travel or like spread within a house?
So almost all of them are travel. I think of all the 13 cases, the only ones where we couldn't confirm if it was travel related were 2. And that's just because of the information that we're trying to get. The information that was given, when you ask information, is there any recent travel, things like that, when the answer is, well, I don't know how I got it. I've been here the whole time. We have to take that at face value and say that they didn't travel.
But most of it was travel related and not related
Absolutely.
Not related to where they work. I think that was kind of what we were trying to get at in terms of these industries and what the issues might be.
Mm-hmm. So with the increase in case expansion, like Dr. Pro was saying, we are getting more people coming in now to be tested, but it's still just the 13 cases.
Yeah, I just saw no new ones today as well. Are there any? So I'm just wondering where we're at in terms of Board of Health decision making in regard to these next two phases. I mean, these are the only things that are outstanding from the state orders, which, as we've heard, are going to be, continue to be very restrictive and phased in a very slow way. So we could either have a second phase as what's been outlined for these two industries, or we could go right along with the governor's orders, depending on the timing. So I don't know what everybody's thoughts are on that. Jason?
Yeah, I watched some of the meeting. I had to kind of come in and out, and it was a really good conversation. So thank you for the Board of Health for meeting for a long time and then meeting again with us. I was curious of where they're heading. Were they okay with 4 people? Did they want to start it next week? I thought I heard something where if we wait for the state to see what they're going to come out with, we know it's going to be 10 or more. I don't think they're going to come more restrictive. And I know our orders are kind of infinity, right? There's no time limit on them. So even if next week we went to whatever the Board of Health suggested, voted in, let's just say 4 people, even on May 18th, that's still going to stand, right? And then we're going to kind of reevaluate and see what the state goes. So whatever the Board of Health comes.
Could people please mute when they're not on?
Whatever the Board of Health comes up with we'll go past May 18th. It could be to the end of May, right? Or even in June. Like nothing changes May 18th. I'm just clarifying.
Yeah.
Sure. I think that'd be correct. I mean, if phase 2 gets adopted, you'd want to be looking at to be proactive what phase 3 would be, and taking that information also that comes down from any changes that the state has with their phases.
Matt?
I guess this may be for Roberto again. Question: if people haven't traveled off island, then that means we have on island transmission, correct? Right.
That's an assumption that yes, it could be correct as long as they're not lying to us. And there have been situations where people are putting down wrong addresses, they're putting down wrong phone numbers. All they want to do is find out if they have it or not.
Matt?
People are asking, because I spoke up last week and I pushed hard to have us, basing this on science. People have asked me, geez, what's it going to be like? Because we're close to the state now. And the reason I say that is we have a high percentage of workforce. We have a high percentage of young people who don't necessarily show the symptoms, but they give it. And we were strict. We did a very good job, and we were strict for, until about a week and a half ago. If we're beginning to get, sort of on island transmission, people say, what will we be? And I say, look across the sound. We'll be Barnstable, will be other areas like that. That's what's going to happen. And if you looked at sort of there's COVID simulators and things like that, it starts slow and then it ramps up. And so it will start very slow and ramp up. I think that if we had a letter today from Brian and Lori Ryder, and they hit it out of the park with their letter. They were saying our concern is day trippers and commuters. If we limited that, if we took care of that, we could be back to work relatively safely. And that I really believe that. And I believe that when we talked about it 2 weeks ago. I'm very concerned about us following the state. If we don't have our own documentation behind it, if we don't understand what our own risk and our own exposure is, I'm very concerned about following the state orders. I would rather be New Zealand than New England.
Greg?
Madam Chair, I just wanted to address the issue raised by Jason as to when these emergency orders expire. Under I apologize, which the supplemental emergency order, which is still in effect subject to the amendment in emergency order number 5, says that it says there hereby continues in effect an emergency order imposing a temporary moratorium on all non-essential construction work until such time as the state of emergency declared due to the COVID-19 outbreak is lifted, as well as an emergency stay-at-home order that limits, among other things, landscaping. So it's not entirely clear the way this is written, whether it's referencing the state's state of emergency or whether the Nantucket Board of Health has declared a town state of emergency. If it's the former and the governor lifts his state of emergency on May 18th, an argument could be made that these orders are lifted as well by operation of that. So my guess is that we're not going to come to a hard stop on May 18th and that the town will have an opportunity to react to whatever the governor does on May 18th. However, if you're concerned, you might want to consider an amendment to this to clarify how long you want this to stay in effect.
Jason?
Yeah, I think that's, and I'm not looking for an amendment. I'm just more trying to think of timing and clarifying, because I think some people were assuming that when the state order came in, that we might go to that, or whatever the Board of Health decides this week or next week, that's going to continue past May 18th. I was kind of clarifying for myself to make sure everybody else understood that. Thank you, Greg.
You're welcome.
Just a couple of things. I think that we have to be very clear in regard to any reasoning of why we are differing from the state at this stage in how we phase this or keep things in place. We really have to be accountable for this to the community. We really came through and did exactly what the hospital wanted us to do. There is no curve, pretty much. They actually said it was steamrolled. And we are part of the state of Massachusetts. People can cross state lines just like we can between town and town off island. And I'm concerned about what is happening off island as well, very much so. But there are a lot of people here who are out of work. There are a number of other public health emergencies that are coming out of this. I don't know if everyone got a chance to read the email from the Safe Place. They are very, very concerned. There are people who are very concerned about putting food on the table. And with all of these mask and glove and sanitation requirements in place, I just hope that people are really going to be clear about the next steps, because I've got to answer to the community on this. And Malcolm?
This has always been Matt's elephant in the room. But what are the legal qualifications or ramifications? And this is for Greg. Can we stop day trippers? Can we stop commuters? If it's can't be done legally, then I don't know. We can talk about it forever.
Greg?
Well, with respect to that issue, we're in uncharted territory here a bit. So, it's not that we have a set body of law or a statute that we can point to say, yes, you can do this, or no, you can't. Generally speaking, there is a right to freedom of movement and freedom of travel, both within the Commonwealth and interstate travel. However, courts have found that those types of constitutional rights can be subject to reasonable government restriction, particularly during a time of emergency. However, when you're talking about actions that curb essential constitutional rights, the court is going to look for whether you've used the least restrictive means in order to curb those rights. There is an opportunity to say that, you know, we have a substantial public need to limit the amount of people who come to the island based on the probability that it will propagate the virus here. However, you know, that's something that exposes the town to risk, that someone will say that it compromises their rights. And, you know, it also may expose the town to financial liability to the extent that you're depriving property owners of their right to use their property. So, you know, we talked about this last week with respect to construction workers and saying that, you know, people who wish to go back to work should only use on-island residents as workers. And, you know, I believed that that was a limitation that could be supportable because it was very limited in its scope. It didn't prevent people from traveling. It didn't prevent people from using their properties. And yet the boards chose not to go in that direction, at least at that point. So, you know, it's something that I think could be legally supported, but should be exercised with caution.
Matt?
Yeah, if I remember what we heard a couple weeks ago, I think we did it really successfully with a 14, if the Board of Health requires a 14-day quarantine for anyone that goes over, including residents, island residents who go over should quarantine as well. We don't discriminate against anyone. My understanding from a couple weeks ago is that would be legal, and that would be defendable. And I think that's something that we should think about, because that is what got us in the good shape we are right now.
And yes, Matt, I agree that that would be a defensible position to take. Again, it's much less restrictive than telling people they can't come at all, but saying that they have to self-quarantine for a period of 14 days. The issue with that becomes enforcement, and how do you enforce a requirement like that? But certainly, you know, you could rely on people's good faith to comply. But, you know, it would be very difficult to not only know who it is that's coming and going, but when they came and went, and whether they've been there for 14 days. And then the further logistical issue of, okay, once they're here and they have to quarantine for 14 days, how do they get their essential services, you know, food, medicine, and other essentials like that. So, I mean, yes, legally, I think we could justify something like that, but the logistics of it would probably be a bit more difficult to implement.
Kristen?
I think when we put these restrictions on construction and landscaping, it was really because our hospital was saying that they weren't ready to handle a surge or to handle any cases. And now we're hearing that they are ready, that they can handle a surge. You know, Gary Shaw today was speaking at Rotary Club that, you know, they really thank the community for everything that they've done to let them prepare. And now they're ready to kind of open up, you know, in that slow, gradual phase. So I'm a bit confused why we're talking about being more restrictive when our hospital can handle it. And I think it's a real disservice to our year-round community that we're not letting them go back to work when the governor's orders would. Like Matt said, the letter from the riders, the letter from Toscana, we're preventing them to work, and we're letting, you know, DPW and all these other places go back. But we're still restricting these. And so I think we should really get back to talking about this order and how we can compromise of what feels right for safety and what feels right for the community. But I think it's time that we push through the phase 2 and open it up for this community.
Thank you, Christy. Rita?
To Christy, I think that what keeps coming up, it's not so much that we're getting more restrictive, it's a matter of looking at where our greatest vulnerability is. And it keeps coming up that it is the day trippers, the commuters, the people who are staying here. short term are going back and forth. So, I think the idea was that if we were stricter there, then we might be able to be less strict on island, because it doesn't seem like we have a significant amount of on island virus, at least that's been tested yet. So, I mean, I do think those should all be considered, especially as we move into a season where we are going to have a lot more people coming to the island and moving on and off the island. And also just to sort of, further inform the board on what was discussed by the Board of Health. We didn't vote on anything. There was quite a bit of discussion. I think the construction where we got hung up, there were a couple questions that we had for Leslie or Paul about some of the wording, what sites this would apply to. But there was just a discussion about, I think, maybe opening it up a bit versus, because 2 of the 3 most recent cases were maybe they didn't get them at work, but they were in the construction industry, whether or not we need more information. So that's sort of where the board left it, just as a roundup. And I was also hoping, my own question during that meeting was just a review from Leslie or Paul about how many more permits they thought this was going to open up to. And also, I think one of the important clarifications that has come up several times is it's the projects that are to be approved, if we did open it up, would still have to fall within the state's orders of safety, sanitation, and essential services, essential operations.
Paul or Leslie, would you like to speak to those items?
Oh. Hi, thank you, Madam Chair. I also had a few questions that came up from the Board of Health meeting too. Sorry, I have a lot of notes here. I'm trying to sort through them all. So there's 2 different drafts of an emergency order number 8 in your packet. And the one starting on page 38 is the one that was drafted by Plus, and the one following that had changes inserted by Town Council and I think the EOC. So I think it's important to know which draft we're talking about changing, because that to me is a little bit unclear right now. The intent from the Plus draft was to allow any construction within, of course, the governor's order to move forward if it had a permit and construction had commenced prior to March 20th. So I think Mr. Cooper had asked about whether or not that would apply to seasonal homes or maybe businesses. And as long as that construction is interpreted by the building commissioner to fall within the governor's order, then it would be allowed to proceed. So I think that's the answer to that. Right now we have about 239 multi-worker permits that have been issued. Many of those were to make structures weather tight, but a lot of those are for year-round residences. There are a lot for roofing and sidewall. So that's what's going on there. We do have those sorted by date, which I don't have all of those numbers available right now, but a lot of the expected end dates are coming up at the end of May. And some questions that I had about which draft or which restrictions the Board of Health wants to move forward with. There was some discussion at the meeting today, and maybe I missed the resolution on this, about whether or not emergency order number 8 would add an exemption for covenant or affordable homes to be able to be issued a new building permit. I know Roberto brought that up. It was raised by a property owner that's trying to build an income restricted unit and can't obtain a building permit. So I think that needs to be resolved if that's something the board wants to include in number 8. Also, the second draft of emergency order number 8 that did not come from Plus has a restriction about no further construction on pools, sheds, and some other items. That's a restriction that we don't support at Plus, but we need to know if that's something that the Board of Health and Select Board want to move forward with. Sheds seem pretty minor in nature, and pools have a lot of safety issues associated with open excavation holes being left open with rebar and other things that, present a safety hazard. And it seems like it's exterior construction, and the workers that would be on a site where there's a pool don't seem to have a different type of COVID-19 risk than workers doing other types of work. So the other thing, the Board of Health discussed the number of workers. Would it stay at 4? Would it move up to 8? That needs some resolution. And of course, the implementation date.
Did the board want to comment on some of those items, or Greg?
Hi, yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to explain the difference between the two versions. The first version that was referred to as the plus version, my understanding is that went before the Board of Selectmen, at least, I think it was last Wednesday. And after that meeting, it was brought back to me that there was confusion as to what that order was supposed to apply to the extent that we were referring to all buildings and structures. And so I don't know that there was clarity at that time that there was still the limitation that the work had to be subject to the limitations in the governor's order. So when we looked at this again, I added essentially a cut and paste of the governor's order into the next draft so that people could see right then and there exactly what types of construction could be allowed. And then in the following paragraph, we tried to give some examples of what we thought might not be considered essential, but certainly, we would defer to the Plus Department and town staff to flesh out that definition if they wanted to, or to just leave it to their own enforcement on a case-by-case basis. But we did think that it was important to list out the limitations in the governor's order so that people didn't have to go to different places to figure out whether or not they could do something.
Does that help, Leslie?
I think listing out the language in the governor's order is fine if people think that adds clarity, but I think adding in exceptions really clouds the issue. I mean, as Attorney Corbo said in the Board of Health meeting today, it's ultimately the building commissioner's interpretation that matters, and those interpretations vary broadly from town to town. And I think putting in exceptions in the order just makes it more confusing. If you have a question, talk to the building commissioner. He's the authority on making that interpretation.
Is there some clarification from the Board of Health? I'm just trying to figure out where you all are at in regard to this second phase. Jim, Ben Malcolm? You're muted. Jim, we can't hear you.
No?
I unmuted you, Jim.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. I brought up the section in the latest draft that says the intent of this program is to allow the continued construction of any structure for which a building permit was passed and for which construction commenced prior to March the 20th. And at the end of the meeting, I thought we were all aboard on this thing saying that we were going to use that sentence. Any structure that had a permit before the 20th could go forward and be completed. That's where we left it, I thought, at the Board of Health meeting. I didn't know that the building department had the right to say who can work and who can't work and what's necessary and what isn't necessary. So I would like to get this straightened out right now before we vote on anything. I need to know if any building that was started with a building permit before the 20th can be completed. I mean, who's to say what's necessary? I believe any building that was started with a permit is necessary to complete. Now, I need to know one way or another where we stand on this before I vote on anything. Thank you.
Does someone want to answer that before I go to Malcolm? Paul?
I just want to provide the board with some information. What's allowed in the governor's order is being interpreted broadly and not narrowly throughout the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. If, as building officials, we were to restrict the types of building permits we were to be issuing, we would have been given state guidance on that from our state building inspectors. No building officials that I know of have had any guidance like that, and I'm pretty well connected in that circle. They've interpreted construction as being essential, and no one is cherry picking what can and can't be allowed. If the town wants to do that, I certainly don't set policy. That's up to the select board and the Board of Health. But I just wanted to color this a little bit for the board and just let you know that, in the town of Falmouth, in the town of Dartmouth, two very big towns with a lot of commercial corridors, all types of construction is being allowed to go forward from frame to finish. And so I would agree with Mr. Cooper's analysis that anyone who had a building permit that was stopped as a result of the order should be allowed to continue and, address it after that. But I certainly support his position on that.
Malcolm?
Well, thank you. To me, a lot of this is very confusing, quite frankly, and I would like the order to be a lot simpler, and I'm beginning to understand it. My concern, and I have to think about this, and when we have our meeting tomorrow, is how long we will implement phase one or not implement phase two. We've got a couple cases of workers. I'm kind of leaning towards waiting a little bit before we implement phase two. But I haven't made a final decision.
That was kind of what I was getting at and asking for the clear reasoning in terms of why we would continue to be different than the governor's order and why we wouldn't phase in some of these things while we have steamrolled the number of cases on the island. Right, and particularly, we will see outside pressures. I mean, I don't even know where to go with the suggestion of saying that anyone who comes on and off this island has to quarantine for 14 days. Because frankly, like if we do that until there's a vaccine, I don't want to live here anymore. Like that's just like an unbelievable idea that we're going to section ourselves off like a private country with no comings and goings. It's just not the way we generally function, or at least most of us that live here. But anyway, aside from that, I'd like to hear from the Board of Health really what they want to do with this phase two. And if they're not ready to implement it or not ready to go to the governor's order, what is the clear reasoning why, so we can answer the community? It's not our vote, but we definitely are the ones taking the heat on it. Steve?
I'd like to myself personally, and I don't know what the rest of the board's going to say, is move. You got to keep moving forward. This is more restrictive than the state order, and to Paul's credit, I a few days ago I made calls to friends up on the North Shore, Manchester, Essex, the South Shore, in Duxbury and Plymouth, and on the Cape, Katuitt, and Oyster Harbors, all that area. They're working. They're actually, they're issuing new permits. So to think that we're not less restrictive is, which this is, and we're trying to balance our economic health here along with getting some other people back to work that really need to get back to work. And I think this this is working. And me personally, the Steamship Authority and the High Line, it's not a COVID-19 incubator. So we have these mitigation protocols in place: wearing your mask, stay away from crowds, wash your hands. If you follow these guidelines, and everybody will, this is how you're going to keep the cases from popping up. It's simple. And I would just like to move forward. Maybe if, we may not get this vote today, maybe we can vote it in tomorrow at a certain date, or do it retroactive. I'm not sure, but those are my feelings about this whole thing. And then as far as the, I agree with Paul I think the pool thing is kind of ridiculous if it's part of a permit or was half open. This is a huge safety and liability issue. And the guys putting these back together, they're outside. Those permits as part of the original permit need to be finished. That should be taken out as far as I'm concerned. Thanks.
Rita?
We spent a lot of time at the start of the meeting talking about the models and the science that Roberto had shown us and what we were going to do with that. And I think we really didn't make a whole lot of progress on the construction back to work plan. I think there were some good points raised. My understanding is that any restrictions or any project that's denied is simply because the building commissioner has had some element of interpreting things as being not within the government's orders. So we can't go beyond looser than the government's orders, which is why it hasn't applied to every single project. I think it would be interesting. I don't know if this is the plan already, but I know Jeff Carlson with the landscaping has a plan to inspect some of the landscape construction projects that are causing a safety issue. And I don't know if that's the same with pools. I imagine some pools maybe just need a finishing touch. Some might actually have, be holes and have rebar coming out. So I don't know if that's a possibility. But I think as regards to moving it forward, again, the Board of Health, we really ended up nowhere. Again, everyone had good points, but for the select board's information, we didn't really have a clear direction. But I would ask Roberto, because that is what we started the whole meeting with, was that, Roberto is our sort of in-house epidemiologist at this stage, and we're relying on him to let us know when he needs extra resources. But we didn't really get to hear from you, Roberto, about your thoughts on 4, 8, 6, expanding more. I don't know if you do have some guidance for us versus waiting to see if more cases do pop up that have some relation to construction.
So we definitely need to make some decisions on all of it. As far as 4, 6, or 8 goes, I would support the 4 across the board with landscapers too. If the board would be willing to go to 6, kind of like 3 landscapers on a site with 3 construction or something like that, 4 or 6 per site, I feel like that makes sense. It's a nice half from the state mandated 10, because regardless, the state still doesn't allow any gathering more than 10 people. There's a lot of conversations out there about, there's anecdotal things about domestic violence is up, there's usage of the food shelter is up, things like that, but we hear that anecdotally, and we haven't seen that information. If we did have that email from a safe place that you mentioned earlier. I haven't seen it, but you mentioned a safe place earlier. I would like to see that data. I would like to see what it is they're talking about compared to last year. It's tough. We're in a very tough position to make this decision, and unfortunately, as the 2 boards, it is your decision. But like Greg said, we're not responsible for other people's behaviors. If people still don't pay attention and they go out and cause situations for themselves that going to get them sick or get other people sick, it's not your fault because of somebody not taking personal responsibility for the work that they're doing. There's a lot in the phase 2, both landscaping and construction, that needs to start. There is, like you said, there are some open sites. Do I think a pool is a safety hazard? An unfinished pool? No. I think we can just put construction fencing around it. And I don't see how finishing a shed is helping sanitation or anything like that either. But there is aspects of the construction, like the Covenant home, for example, that is a real need here on the island. And we haven't seen the mental health fallout from that yet. People who have to move out because of the Nantucket Shuffle, things like that. So that's just where I do think I would like to see some sort of a vote on this construction phase and on this landscaping phase this week, so that we know where we are and we have an implementation date and we have that guidance. Because just like what Don said, it is our decision, but it is the Board of Health's decision, but they're getting a lot of the blowback, and so are we as the staff. So I think as long as we have a decision made and we know when a start date is, it would at least alleviate a lot of those concerns.
Helene, you had your hand up, and then I think Jason did. Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, I do. I think we do need to make a decision this week. I quite frankly think the Board of Health needs a little more time to really hash this out. We spent a lot of time at the beginning of the meeting discussing the COVID advisory task numbers, et cetera, and ways to proceed. The other point is we're not the state. We're an island, and because of our very careful mitigation, we have created a lovely little bubble of immunity. And we see that as more and more people are coming to the island, both workers and seasonal homeowners, we're looking at the number of tests being performed. We're now up to 350. We have 12 pending, and that's going to increase. That's going to keep happening. I think for myself, yes, I want to see things get moving again, but I really would like to have the Board of Health have at least one more day to really discuss this.
We have a meeting scheduled for tomorrow at 4. We can definitely continue.
Okay, I didn't know that. Okay, thank you.
Jason, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Don, and thank you to the Board of Health for this discussion. Whatever they decide, 4 or 6 or 4 and 5 with a COVID officer, I think it'll be great. I do think we need to make more decision. I think what's really important is to think about trying to get to to simplify everything that we're doing. There's a limited capacity in our town departments and for everybody, limited resources to get this done. So if we spend more time in fine tuning all of this, it takes time away from us thinking about how are people going to get their groceries in June, July, and August, and how do we come up with creative ways with open markets? If we don't allow us to align more with the state, are people going to use off-island services? And so now we actually created more people coming here because we're not allowing the locals to go to work. That's already happening in some sectors, not so much construction and landscaping. I think we could see more of that. So I think trying to get us back to a simpler form of restrictions, even if we're more restricted than the state, but keeping it more simple so we can communicate it easier to everyone. I think that's really important. And just for some data, there is 380 families in the food pantry right now. Normally this year it's 40 or 50. I just got this from Human Health and Services, who got it from the food pantry. There's normally around 50 people getting the rental assistance, and right now there's around 200 waiting or involved. So there's some numbers to show you that it is real, that people are hurting. Thank you.
Would it be helpful to have some kind of do you guys want a recommendation from us in regard to some of these tweaks? I mean, what would help you to be able to get to a decision point? And Malcolm?
Yeah, I would like to, as I've said before, and I agree with Jason, the whole orders are much too complicated. They're also, you can hardly interpret them. And that's where I think a lot of our problem is. I think we should vote on this at our meeting tomorrow. And I think somebody somehow in the next 24 hours could get this to a 1 or 2 page document with some emphasis on personal responsibility, has been said. And again, my issue is I have to resolve with myself the timing of this, but I'll figure that out by tomorrow. It's just the reason we're having problems, the reason we're getting pushback, and the reason there's controversy, it's people stop me in the street and call me up and they start asking me questions that when I think about it, I said, well, is that really it said? Is that what it said? We have to make this simple, very simple. Thank you.
Jim, you had your hand up. Jim Cooper.
The select board is waiting for us to make a decision, and you're happy with any decision we make. I'm sure Steve and the rest of the Board of Health can get together today and talk about this. And if you're looking for a number for the builders and the other thing, we can come up with a number tomorrow. If you people will live with it.
For me, I would just like to see a next phase go into place so that people, right, we're dealing with a lot of issues where people are feeling very discriminated against right now because we only opened up some very specific criteria for projects. The entire rest of the state is working in construction. Actually, like a lot of the country is working in construction without, from what I'm hearing on the news and so forth, not being a total analyst of this by any way, shape, or form, but that there's not a lot of cases that are attributed to passing it on construction with all of the safety measures that have been put in place. And we have to come to a place where we're going to, like, this virus isn't going away and we've got to live with it for the next year and a half, 2 years. We've got to teach people and let them figure out how to function. So, I mean, that's like kind of a long rant, but I would just like to see us get back to somewhere closer into line where this state is, unless there's really solid reasoning not to. And with only 13 cases in 8 weeks on the island, and a lot of people already recovered, it's also cases and an actual death rate or something to look at too. Sorry, Christine has her hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to add from my perspective, what I would like to see go through is the new permits for affordable or covenant homes. I'm okay with 4 or 6, but if we restrict it to 4, I would like for there to be an option to apply for a waiver for the building department. Roofers and projects like that tend to need more than 4 people. And I also would like to see it be implemented. If it's voted on tomorrow, then implemented either tomorrow or the next day. That's kind of where I'm standing.
Oh, Steve?
Yeah, just like what Christy said too. I'm thinking about at least if we, the 6 number sounds good. You're going from 45 miles an hour to 65 instead of 45 to 90. So, I mean, that's a good option. And I'm ready to get it done tomorrow myself too. I would just like to move this forward.
Sorry, Matt, I was muted.
That's all right. No, I'd be happier with 4 than the other. What I will say, I don't want my position has been sort of represented as anti-opening. I'd like to open and control travel to and around the island so the most people can work the most safely. It is and people say, well, I'm against the economy. I'm not against the economy. I shared a study that came out a couple days ago from the University of Virginia, from Bethune and Coronet, and they looked at it, and they looked at staying in a going to herd immunity versus the strict stay-at-home we are in versus an optimal containment policy. They found the one that was most economically advantageous to the most amount of people was optimal containment. And that is sort of in between what we were doing. What that means, if you looked at that, what that would mean is you would still have distancing, still have masks, you'd have that type of thing. You would get your tracing and your testing together. And then we would have a chance. I think that we are being naive to think that just masks and just, and just masks, because we'll all try to do the right thing, is going to work. If you guys have looked at any of the COVID simulators, have played with any of this pandemic, the simulators that are out there, they're based on what's happening already. And the numbers are, go off the charts once it starts already. So, so talking about loosening it further than that, I think we're spending a lot of time talking about, sort of how to open this and trying to convince ourselves to open it because we all want to do that so badly, but we're not spending enough time understanding the actual real economic impacts if this happens. If we have a surge and we have a mess this summer, it will be sunk for years. And so I just think that we're spending too much time talking about, sort of this order to hurry and with a set determination that people have made. And, and I don't think we're looking really at what we should be looking at health-wise.
Jason, then Rita, then Paul.
I just want to say one more thing because I forgot in my last talk was I think for me it's helpful to look at this in two separate areas, like of getting some people back to work and controlling it so people aren't going off island and bringing people over. And then there's the summer, right? And then there's July and August, and it's very different. I know they're a little bit related, but I think these particular landscaping and construction orders are for now, right? And then there's the summer and how we handle day trippers if there is any, and short-term rentals if there are any. I think it's a little separate to me.
Rita, and then I think Paul had something.
Yeah, I was just sort of recapping so that we are as productive as possible in the meeting tomorrow. That I think the select board has really made it clear that we want to see a next phase with some number and figure out what number that is. And again, Roberto gave us, I think, some great guidance that we can all think about over the next 24 hours. One of the things that had come up in the process that sort of Don Libby and I had put together, we didn't get a chance to talk about at the last meeting, and then it sort of came up again. I actually have lost track of the weeks. Came up at the last meeting. The Friday meeting, that's what it was. I think this has to be translated into Spanish. And so I don't think it can be implemented immediately. However long it takes our administration, I know they're working really hard. Whatever they need to be able to do to put it into Spanish, I think with half of the cases being in the Hispanic community, we have to make sure the education is, that people can be educated. So I think, and another thing that was brought to my attention as well is that we should, if it's video, bullet points, written, not necessarily in legalese, there's sort of a direct translation that is needed, but just to communicate it so that people can take personal responsibility. And I think that, at this stage, moving forward with 4, opening up a bit, I'm more comfortable with, but I do think we just have to be realistic about the level of compliance. And I think it's very different from, say, sort of a retail scenario versus in the field landscaping and construction. It's not because people aren't trying, they are. It's because we've all been doing things a certain way for 10 years, 15 years, 30 years, whatever it is. And having 2 weeks to try and change the way you do everything. Landscaping construction can be really sort of communal activities, even though you might be, pushing a lawnmower by yourself, you're at the truck, you're going to Cumbies, you're you're masked, you're in and out of the truck. So I just think that, I think the naivety for me is thinking that we're going to get, massive amount of compliance. People are going to try, and we're just going to have to see what happens at this stage. But I just think we need to keep that in mind. And I can see it when I'm driving around when, again, people are trying, but we're not going to get full compliance. And so I think in terms of how many more permits and how we open it up, I think we need to keep that in mind.
I think Greg is on. He addressed the translation part earlier today about how much time Florencia needs to get that done. Maybe he wants to comment on that. Greg Tibnan.
I'm sorry. There's too many Gregs.
Sorry. It was just, you had mentioned it in our meeting earlier about Florencia and the translation.
Yes. So Florencia, our public outreach manager, is ready and willing to translate the documents into Spanish. There's a difference between summarizing a document and actual translation, especially with legal terms. So it's not just a 5 or 10 minute quick translation like, oh, I think this says this. This is an actual legal document. We've also hired someone to translate into Portuguese. So they're willing to do it. It just takes it's not a 5-minute thing. They need a couple hours to do it. Last time was a little longer. Take as long.
Thank you. I think Paul had his hand up before. Should I come back to you on the orders?
Thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to, I agree with Christie's position that there has to be a provision in there for a waiver from the 4 people. Setting a modular home can't be done with 4 people. It's definitely requires more than that, or they can't set the house. And there could be a situation where, framers need to lift a wall that's 35 feet long, and they need more than 4 people to do that. So I think it's important that that provision be put into the order, and that's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you. So, I guess you guys are going to reconvene tomorrow to make some final decisions on number of people, timing, the covenant home issue, which has arisen. It's a lot for us to kind of reinvent the wheel on all of these things, and it does take some time. So I hope that Council and Plus and Natural Resources are available for that meeting tomorrow. Will everybody be on so you can really finalize this language and get all of the input needed? Yes. I'm seeing everybody's available. What time did you say your meeting was? 4 o'clock? Okay. Christine?
There are no issues with the landscaping. Is that possible to be voted on tonight, or does that still need further review?
If you want to try and finalize these points, but you didn't get them both voted in tonight, that would be fine. Steve?
I was just going to say, I think the landscaping one was fine. I think my take is the rest of the board would probably want to mull this over and make a decision tomorrow.
Okay. Rita? I'm seeing Rita's hand up. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. I was just looking for a point of clarification. If say the current back to work plan was adopted with limiting it to 4 workers still, but opening up the projects, then it would cover covenant houses, wouldn't it? We wouldn't need to make an exception.
No, the issue is that there's that's arisen is that there's a covenant house on Clarendon that doesn't have a building permit. Everything was in place with the back and everything, but the actual permit hasn't been issued. And right now, one of the biggest things, aside from the limitation on number of workers, that is more restrictive in this than the state, is that no new permits will be issued. Mm-hmm. So a lot of what's happening here is tying up all of this open work, which I think there's some advantage to getting that stuff done while there's less of a population on the island, in terms of things being spread around, but no new work would be commencing. Does that make sense? Jim?
So we're just talking about one permit for Covenant House, one house?
Well, one that we know of. If you exempted it, any new covenant homes could be applied for. But there was this one was where the issue arose.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, unless you just want to grant it the one as an exemption. But I would personally like to see any new affordable housing be exempted. Matt?
I'll just remind everyone, we could write these orders to direct people to go directly to the job site and directly home, pack your lunch, because the virus doesn't discriminate. It doesn't, every chance that people have that pass each other, that hang out with each other, that the more contacts they have during the day, the more dangerous it is for them and for everybody else. So if we are going to go to this, which it seems we are, I think we should be thinking about at least, and if we are, I think we should be doing it for off island, but I don't hear support for that. I think we should be thinking about directing people not to congregate, have the COVID officer pick up the small wares they need. Anything we can do to lessen the amount of interaction between people, the better we will be for the health of the island. My other concern with this is that, if this is just starting, if we have, local transmission and this is just starting, if you look at the graphs, that means that we are going to be sort of hitting, having our biggest problems 6, 8, 10 weeks from now. So we may get all this work wrapped up, and then what we're going to happen is we may be back in some sort of strict stay at home again, some version of that. So the choices we're making, we have a choice right now to do everything we can to avoid that. And we're not, and if we don't, we don't. But I think we have to realize that the choice we're making now may be leading to that choice then.
I think that, there was a lot of discussion on that last time, but, I continue to go back to, I know the virus itself isn't fair, but putting additional restrictions on essential services that aren't, nobody's telling people who work at Stop and Shop where they can eat lunch. No one's telling the banks where they can get lunch. I'm just a little bit worried about the fairness aspect. Which I also continue to worry about the fact that we have local firefighters who commute, we have building inspectors who commute, we have paving workers who commute, and those things are essential, and that's why they're allowed, but they also haven't been attributed to any significant spread of this virus. But there are a lot of comments that I think that that the Board of Health should see on that are coming in too. But I can't even begin because there's so many of them. Matt, did you raise your hand?
Yeah, I did. The virus isn't fair, and if we follow the fair argument, what's going to happen is everyone's going to open because the virus isn't fair. What's happening to all of us is not fair. And I think we have to be very careful, to follow that argument. If we follow it to its logical conclusion, it will all be opened, and I don't want to tell people not to come to lunch, I have bills to pay too, but I think that we have to, if we're going to, do that, I just think that's a reasonable step to ask, so anyway, I know what's going to happen. It's fine, but I have to speak my mind, and I have to speak, what I firmly believe is the case. I didn't think when I went to college that statistics classes I took and regression analysis, I didn't think I'd ever need any of that as a baker. And I have found a lot of it to be very useful right now looking at a lot of the models and a lot of what we're facing. And, so I'm taking it very seriously. I've done a lot of work on it. And I just, I feel very strongly that we have a chance right now to really, test and trace. We have off-island people, wealthy people who are willing to help us do that. We have a chance to be a leader and show how we can actually come to a new normal. And that's what I'm really hoping that we do.
Christy?
Yeah, I was just going to comment on, I'm the last one that wants to make a decision that would impact our summer, but I think we have to remember that, the longer that we stay closed it's going to prevent COVID, but no matter what point we open up, we're going to start to see cases until there's a vaccine. So if we wait another 2 or 3 weeks and start opening up, it's going to happen then. We're going to see cases then. It's just that's what the virus is doing. So we can sit here and keep waiting, but at some point we are going to see cases. And the whole point is not to completely eliminate COVID, but to not overwhelm our hospital, and they have the resources. It's going to come here. We're seeing summer people come here. We're seeing the boats being full. Steamship was sold out, and we're going to keep seeing this, and trying to put off the construction just seems like we're tackling the wrong problem.
This was supposed to be something very, very temporary, these additional measures, and we did it to help the hospital. The hospital has said, go back to what the state is pretty much. Maybe Dr. Pearl wants to speak to it.
I'm feeling ready to speak for about an hour, but no, I'm feeling that now is the time to creep open a little bit because it's early in the season. We have a controllable population and we have resources. And to Matt's point, we have the capacity to test, get the test results quickly, get onto the tracing quickly and onto the isolation quickly. And Roberto and I have both looked at all 13 cases, and we know pretty much almost precisely where each one arose and got here. And none of them seem to have created this whirlwind of spread yet in our community. And I do think that the measures that we've all taken to trace and to track, and because everyone in the community is afraid of this, people don't want to get it. Healthy young people who would be the least risk, they don't want to get it. And so people seem to be very compliant. And I do think the community as a whole has been extremely successful in limiting spread from even the cases that we know about. And we know there are many more because we know that relatives of those people probably have it. And yet they haven't spread it widely. So, I'm a little bit optimistic that we can start cracking open this door in the way with construction and landscaping, which it seemed to us to be the least risky. They're outside. They're usually, people can get some distance from each other rather than a crowded restaurant or, up and down Main Street or in a gallery or something. And it's critical to the economy. So it seems like a win-win as far as opening up a little bit, particularly at this time in the spring.
Well, I know you all want to probably adjourn to your meeting tomorrow unless there's additional comments. Oh.
Are we? No, I don't have any more comments on that, but I agree with Dr. Pearl's assessment. It was well said. Do you want to do something with the landscape now before we adjourn? With Rita?
I was hoping we could just run through, just really quickly kind of recap what I've heard, because again, if we're discussing this tomorrow, I've heard looking for another phase, what it's going to be. We're still somewhere between the 4 to 8. I'm not sure where the Board of Health will land. I know Matt is making the case for restrictions, but I'm not sure that I'm hearing that. But a possible from Paul Murphy, if it ends up at 4, that you'd like to suggest a special waiver for 6 people as needed. Not sure if I heard that correctly. And 2 people per truck is now in both orders, landscape and construction. We haven't discussed that, but Roberto did say as long as there's PPE, that's fine. And I think then an implementation date. So I just want to make sure that the Board of Health, that we have all those things in mind. Oh, and the new construction, at the moment, that it's either open or that it's limited to affordable covenant housing. Were those sort of the main points that are up for discussion tomorrow?
Yeah, and I think Greg's probably taking all these notes down so we don't forget. Malcolm?
One more thing is just that I think there really is an overwhelming call for simplicity. So whatever way that we can, and maybe that's in, legalese can't always be simple, but at least in our summary. Mind.
Sorry. Malcolm had his hand up.
Yeah, I agree with Rita. I think I found this last hour very helpful to me. I heard a lot of different opinions, and I know where I want to go with this. I think we should do landscaping, and tomorrow when we're all a little, I'm very tired right now. It'd be nice. I don't like to vote on a crazy head, but if any way we can make this simpler, very simple. Yes, you have to have a legal document. Can we approve the legal document and then somebody, as we were suggesting in Spanish, even do that in English, like 1 or 2 pages? This is the bullets that you have to follow. That to me would be a great help for the community. And I'm going to say one more thing. I think I've debated myself about 4 to 8. 8's fine. I mean, if we make it 4 and you have to apply for it, it'll just make it more complicated. And we have to make this simple. So I'm waiting for tomorrow. Thank you all.
Greg Corbo.
Hi. So I'll try not to take offense at the legalese comments, but I think there's 2 aspects of this order that we've put into one document. So the first aspect of it is what is allowed, or what types of construction are allowed. The other part of it is, if you're allowed to do construction, what are your expectations in terms of safety precautions at the site? With the exception of changing the number of workers and the number of people who can be in a vehicle, nothing else about the safety precautions has changed. And so what we can do is we can separate it into 2 documents. So one document has the safety precautions, and then the other document just explains what is allowed. I think that might be a way to simplify everything for people. This way they don't have to get bogged down in reading everything. They can only look at what applies to them.
Before you guys go, can I run through some of these public comments so people can feel that they have gotten them out there? Someone wanted, they'd like the Brian Ryder letter to be posted. That was from Deanne Atherton. Chris Castillo said, ask the Highline to get rid of the first boat. John Pierce, where is David Gray on his sewer findings? Maybe we can get an update on that. Edward Sanford, we are in good shape on the COVID front today and terrible shape economically. We do not need a model to predict what will happen to the island economy if we greatly limit the seasonal population. It will be an unmitigated and long-lasting financial disaster. There has to be balance. There has to be balance. Victoria Waterhouse, why is mulching and landscaping essential and excavation is not? Frank Daly, just look at a simple clarification. 1, the town does not have the ability to restrict people coming and going to and from the island. 2, soon we will have tens of thousands of seasonal residents coming to the island from around the country and around the world. 3, there are unsafe conditions throughout the island because of partially completed projects. 4, the town of Nantucket is actively bringing over multiple construction crews from off island, CNC Construction, Victor, etc. 5, there are reports of increases in substance abuse and mental health issues. 6, there are reports of increases in domestic violence. 7, the amount of families that are utilizing food, rent, and heating assistance is historically 50, but it's now over 400. 8, people on island are struggling to provide for their families. 9, islanders are traveling off the island for work. 10, the state allows 10 people on the job site. 11, we are fretting over increasing the amount of people on a job site from 4 to 8 people, all while imposing increased sanitary measures. Is this correct? William Cassidy, Madam Chair, I second in the strongest possible terms Edward Sanford's position and concerns. Amisol 26, how about one person per every 300 square feet? Suzette Brown, guidance from the hospital or Board of Health regarding changeovers for rentals would be appreciated. Justin Quinn, we are restricted on a job site and no restrictions at the Stop and Shop. Tiffany Fearon, I think we continue to wait on implementing the phases as they are outlined. We will be crippled. Chris Christillo, vote needs to happen today. Stop dragging this on. Lynn Beeger, quarantining is not realistic. Better education about what is realistic and doable. 1, masks outside house, 6 feet apart, and don't show up to businesses without knowing how they are operating. Marion Roland Conley, you are continuing to go over and over the same territory. People need to work and we need to vote ASAP. Michael Marsandries, agreed, Marion, nothing new here. Wear a mask, social distance, but no decisions being made. Justin Quinn, putting general limit per job site is crazy if the property is 40,000 square feet and the house is 5,000 square feet. Vanessa Rendero, please vote today so that the locals can, I don't know if that got cut off. Brooke Moore, 400 families getting food versus 40 on average. Vanessa Rendero, please vote today so that locals can plan ahead. Buzz Polchinski, we keep getting caught up on trying to be more restrictive than the state. Why? Our protection is isolated, which is fast disappearing with our summer influx of visitors, which you cannot stop. Buzz Polchinski, we are not going to need low-income housing or similar if we keep on this course. People are definitely leaving the island. I know of several families that have left. Michael Marsandries, when all this is said and done, much is said and little is done. Justin Quinn, so you want to put snow fence around an open pool with rebar and maybe young children are in the house for the summer? Lou Borelli, there is no perfect solution. Waiting for one to miraculously appear is not a winning strategy. The board needs to vote, implement, and measure. We need to put our damn masks on. Michael Marsandries, BOS and BOH, you are constantly kicking the can down the road. This should have been decided last week, except Mr. Visco had not read the relevant documents. Bruce Mandel, if BOH wants more time than they ought to have it, if anything goes sideways, it will be on them. SB and the rest will be pointing at BOH. Give them the time they need. Bruce Mandel, any chance the interpretive medical decisions can be made by people with a medical background? Frank Daly, if simplicity in the document is paramount, line up with the state. Buzz Polchinski, you need to put in place a completely superseding order that nullifies the old orders and put it in place. Verbiage of referencing preceding orders and portions thereof make it a mired down mess. Stephen Van Putten, line up with the state, simple. Brooke Moore, please hold implementation until documents can be translated. Michael Marsandries, BOH, you've had weeks to analyze data and info and come up with a plan. What have you been doing? John Miles, control is a powerful word. Victoria Waterhouse, the hospital said they are ready for a surge. What if we never have a surge? Bruce Mandel, Matt is hitting it out of the park right now. Frank Daly, is there a model that represents tens of thousands of seasonal residents arriving while year-rounders stay at home? Victoria Waterhouse, again, where does excavation fall in all of this? Act Citizen, many people not complying as it is. Daniel Martano, supersede Nantucket orders with lining up directly with state orders. Besides a smaller hospital, Nantucket is no different than any other town in Mass. Joseph Toppin, I agree with slow opening as Steve Visco mentioned, because if we become a hotspot, will anyone want to spend time on islands this summer? Daniel Sammartano, then start developing what is the most comprehensive educational program and functional measures that allow commerce to begin returning and adjust to the new normal. Or just close the docks and become a disaster of an island. Act Citizen, many landscapers driving two-door truck as it is, no one controlling and no one cares. Stephen Cheney, amen, Frank, lock down all the locals until they lose their livelihoods, when in 2 to 4 weeks, Island will be packed with people that have a right to be here. Where is the logic? Raymond DaCosta, I love all the work, but make no decisions and be concise. Everyone I have spoken to is so confused from these 2-hour talks. Make decisions, put them up, and leave it at that. Act citizen, maybe a slow opening will get people working. And from David Gray, no result. I emailed them today. As soon as I get it, I will get it to them. I mean, it keeps going on with a lot of the same comments. But I thought that because you guys haven't had public comment in your meeting, you should hear some of the things that people are saying. So anything further from our joint meeting? You guys obviously do not have to continue on for the rest of our meeting since you have one tomorrow. Steve?
You're good. Wait.
Does anybody have anything else? So we're going to do both tomorrow. I'm asking the rest of the board, landscape and building. Is that what I'm hearing now?
Yes, we're voting.
Yes.
For vote at 4 o'clock. I think we've got, as I said before, we got great input from select board. We got some great input from the public comment. So I think we can do that very quickly.
Okay, so you guys got to have other stuff to talk about, unless, right? The rest of the board meeting.
Yeah, you guys can fall off if you want to, and just reconvene tomorrow, hash it out with Plus and Council and Natural Resources, and hopefully you'll be able to finalize a next step.
Greg?
Stephen, I will try to adjourn your meeting.
I will try to get a new draft out to everyone as soon as possible tomorrow.
Thanks. This is to our board members. Can I get a motion to join this part of the?
So moved.
Okay, a second.
Second.
Okay, by roll call vote, James Cooper.
Here.
Malcolm.
Yes.
Helene.
Aye.
Rita.
Yes.
And chairman says aye. Okay, we'll thanks everybody. We'll see you tomorrow.
You.
See you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thanks. So I don't know if there's any other updates on the emergency orders. I think that was the main thing, was to continue to discuss ones that are really different than the state. And I think everything else is pretty much in line with the state now. Am I correct in that? I don't see anybody jumping up. Jason?
Can we give just a quick overview of what was said on Monday, I think afternoon, by the governor's office for non-essential businesses, what they can and can't do? How they clarified that?
Is that in regard to the retail?
But I think that's mainly what it is. I can give an update, or if Chris or anybody else knows better.
Oh, Christy, why don't you go?
Yeah, I was going to say Jason or myself. So the governor did relax restrictions on non-essential businesses effective Monday. So the non-essential businesses can have employees enter the store up to 3 to do shipments and deliveries. So you still have to follow the same protocols of wearing masks and following social distancing. But the previous order had only the owner being allowed to go into the business. And now that has been relaxed to employees. The second thing is that it allows for no contact delivery. So there's still no curbside delivery. But if a non-essential business can deliver here on island instead of shipping off island and coming back. So if you order from Island Variety or Daria or Bookworks, they can now deliver that to you, and they can also have up to 3 employees in their business.
And Manager Christy, it's also have to wear a mask, have to social distance, very strict rules. You just can't go in and kind of get back to normal. So I would suggest anybody looking at those FAQs on the state site.
Yes. And the other thing is you're allowed to be in for organizing for shipments. And so it's not necessarily to set up your store or, do other things. It's really the employees are allowed to go in. It's for warehousing and storage or shipment.
Thank you. Okay, should we move on to an update on number 5, the Board of Health on restaurant inspections? I don't think there's too much of a change to Roberta's saying inspections have started. Okay.
Yeah, the inspections are started. Everything's back. The ones who's starting to work with takeout, John is meeting with them. John, my inspector, is meeting with them on site as they set up their inspections and going over individual site recommendations and things like that.
Okay. We should probably turn public comment back on for a minute as we talk about these other items, economic impact work groups. Who's going to update? Oh, Matt.
Yeah, before you go, I just want to make a shout out for John Hedden. He inspected us this year, and he was very thorough. He did a really good job, and I have complete faith he'll do a good job. Sort of with the increased safety that everyone has to do.
Thank you. If he's not watching, I'll definitely pass that along to him.
Thanks. I think Janet's on to give us an update on number 6. And Jason.
Jan and I talked. She told me to open with this. So we started the first week of our economic recovery task force, and this week is just roundtables with anybody who wanted to sign up and register. Sometimes we have 50 or 60 people on them. We've done 6 sectors so far. Actually, we've done more sectors than that. We've done 6 roundtables. Some sectors we had to put together. We had 2 more, one tomorrow, one Friday, and they went really well. Having the Novak group and Julia and her team there has been really, really helpful. It's very organized, and it's kind of it is broken into 3 different areas of what are your short-term and long-term challenges in your business and sector. The second part is we break into these little breakout groups within Zoom, which I didn't know you could do, which is very interesting. And then you kind of come back to the main group, and everybody was working on 3 things that the town could do to help them emerge successfully throughout this season and fall and winter. And so it's all been really helpful. We looked at safety protocols. We've had 172 people registered over these 6 meetings. Some of the feedback I've gotten is it's been very helpful to be able to talk to other people in our industry. Not every, like restaurant, retail, real estate. Some of those have been working on these things for 2 months, and other industries have not. So it's been really helpful for them. It's not focused on when, it's focused on how, like how to survive and thrive through this year. So that's kind of all the notes that I have. Janet, Christy, anything else you want to update?
Yeah, I had a similar feedback that what we've been hearing is not so much of when, but it's been how. And I think yesterday we heard a lot of people talking about hope for the summer and hope for how we're going to emerge safely and reopen. And it's really been a shift to hear from that panic to how we can think creatively to survive.
There are a lot of parallels across the different sectors, so I think we're going to be able to find a kind of template to help people figure out how to come back once we get that phased in thing that Wendy's group is working on about how we're going to be able to reopen businesses.
And I want to let everybody also know that the Novak group is capturing every comment, every idea, and pulling them all together, and we'll be putting them out. So it's just very inclusive and be very transparent. It's just a matter of compiling it all.
We have one public comment. Ryan Rosano, thoughts on usage of restaurant, store, and public restrooms. Sure, that's going to be a big cleaning protocol question. Roberto?
Yes, so that's definitely a protocol question. One of the things that's going to end up happening is setting up a more frequent cleanup or disinfection protocol. I think one of the easiest ways to do that is those fogger machines. They look like a giant Nerf gun. They release some sort of a disinfection. Some of them use hypochlorous acid. Some of them use some electrostatic disinfectant, things like that, hydrogen peroxide. You'll probably have to increase the frequency of cleaning, especially in the areas that are going to allow bathroom use. A lot of times in the smaller areas that don't have smaller restaurants and stuff like that don't have liquor licenses aren't always required to have a bathroom unless they meet a certain threshold. So if you're going to allow public use, you're going to have to upgrade your cleaning schedule and protocol.
Matt?
This is a question for Roberto. Will restaurants be required to have bathrooms? I had people contact me today saying that's one of the scariest things. If they do open at 50% or 40%, they're worried about transmission. When someone goes in and touches something and leaves and the next person goes in, that they're really worried.
As of right now, some restaurants aren't even required to have bathrooms. It's tied to occupancy and your liquor license, or your liquor license. I think I haven't thought of anything local to restrict bathroom use. I think that'll be kind of a bad idea to not allow connections to the bathroom.
Then I'll clarify. Then that's a we will require the bathrooms still. So the restaurants have to know that they are going to be, they are going to be required to keep their bathrooms opened and to clean them regularly.
If the state law requires your bathroom to be open, you're going to have your bathroom open.
Scares me.
Could be a bit of a public health nightmare if people are trying to find a place to go to the bathroom too, though.
Exactly. Not having bathrooms available makes it worse.
Okay. Anything else on number 6? I'm not seeing anything. PIO, I think you've been going crazy with public comments. I don't know.
I told Greg I'd take this for him in exchange for the public comment duty. Although there's not a whole lot to report from PIO, we're just getting at FAQs, and every time something comes up that's being asked, frequently, we try to get it on the website and get other things like the mask order that went into effect today, get that on and provide links to where people can get additional information. So that is all very much ongoing. If I don't mind just moving right into item 8, with town services status, we are moving people back into public offices as we can with protocols in place, safety protocols, sanitization protocols, things like that. There are some people who are working remotely. There are some people who are not quite back to work yet. There are some people who may not be back to work for specific reasons like childcare. They are subject to the, I won't get the name right, but the special coronavirus family medical leave. So we're working on that. We're working to get a kind of a guidebook out to all of our employees so they know what to expect when they get back to work and when they're when the public gets back in as well, which right now is scheduled for May 18th, but hopefully we'll be ready by then. If we're not, we also will be working on ways to serve the public remotely or outside of the building somehow. We are continuing to do our weekly calls with the emergency response team. We had one today at noon. The back to work plans I mentioned. We are trying to get out continually daily communication with employees. I'm not sure it's been totally daily lately, but so at least 2 or 3 times a week they get a video or a survey or some other kind of information from the town. The board is getting the daily sit rep, which I think as of next week, if it's okay with you all, I'm going to start doing on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And select, I guess that's about it. That's it.
Thank you. There's one public comment. Bill Greeter, I haven't seen any public identification of COVID advisory group, and what are their qualifications?
Not sure what that means.
Okay.
Is that the group the Board of Health talked about earlier? Because that, I think, is, I don't know.
Rita?
Well, I saw Matt raising his hand, and I was going to say Roberto, but we did talk about that earlier, about who they were, about an ad hoc group. But I'll leave it to Matt and Roberto to fill in.
Matt?
I'll let Roberto go, and then I'll.
My takeaway from the Board of Health meeting was that there's not going to be a officially recognized advisory group at this point. As information comes available, as I work with looking for information, and I work with the hospital to identify those sorts of groups and that sort of information, we will reach out to specifically vetted groups or group people. It was my understanding from the board, and Rita, correct me if I'm wrong, that there is no COVID advisory group officially recognized from the Board of Health.
Rita?
I think that's sort of where we ended today, but what I got the sense was that the board wants you, Roberto, to have access to the resources that you need. There was discussion about the group, wanting the group to have represent a sort of a broad spectrum of people and stakeholders, and we discussed briefly, is it a group that Roberto would appoint? Is it a group that would have an application process? And I think we sort of got stuck on the logistics, the time needed for that. And I think so the de facto at the moment is that Roberto has groups that he's already working with or looking to, and can come back to the board if he needs more assistance. Not to say that groups that are out there can't send in information the same way anyone can send information in to department heads and 10 emails. But that's where we left it. I don't think there was a sense that we don't want one ever, but that right now we're looking to Roberto as our main point of contact for anything epidemiology related.
Matt?
Right, the group that started was an ad hoc group that saw that there was a void that needed to be filled. They saw that Roberto needed needed some assistance, which I feel he welcomed, and I think they worked well together, at least what I've heard. A couple of people, are on island and are very talented. They reached out to epidemiologists in Seattle and some in the government, parts of the government. They've had the work that they did, have I guess has been submitted to people who have marked it up, and so I think we should be, at least I am thankful that they stepped up, because they know how important this is to the island, and they're concerned, and it's their expertise. And I think, I think that they should be thanked and given a lot of thanks for all the hard work they put in to sort of give the Board of Health and give the Select Board the ground and Roberto the grounding we need to make a good decision. I think that they did a great job. So leave it at that. I'm glad that they stepped up. I hope that if, as we move forward, I hope that it could be voted on and put in place. This isn't, my sense is this isn't going away and anytime soon. And my sense is that expertise that they have is going to be needed. There's a lot of people on Nantucket with a lot of connections that could help us, and we could become the leader in how to handle this if we would welcome them into the tent and and listen to their expertise. It would be amazing.
I do have a public comment that came in. from Melissa Murphy, and her question is, who wrote the report submitted to the Board of Health? It is so unusual to have a public report with no names attached to it. Rita had her hand up, but I don't know if Roberto wants to answer that question, or Matt then raised it.
So the report was written primarily working with, it was Scott White, Jacques Zemeckis' sister, Susan, who is from Seattle. I don't know if she's at the university or not. There were a couple other people who were emailed. For some reason, I'm blanking on some of those names right now. But yeah, it's definitely unusual to have it with no names. I know those were, I know the names were removed at the request of some of the members.
Okay, I think that stuff needs to be very transparent, and that information should be released and made available. I mean, we were going to talk about this on Friday, but maybe we don't really need to anymore. So it's all coming up tonight. There's one other public comment. Nantucket taxpayer, whoever that is, once you go to biweekly situation reports to the board, would you please include them in the meeting packets? Also, letters and emails to the board should be included in the packet for agenda items. So I guess with us referencing certain emails that come in, it's so hard to take in public comment this way. But I mean, this is helping, but a lot of people are sending us their comments in more significant letters and emails. And then we do sometimes refer to them. So we should probably try and get everything included. Oh, it's also being suggested to me that as these comments come in, if you have some unidentifiable name like Nantucket taxpayer, you really need to put your name in the comment so that I can read it. If we were in a public meeting, you would have to come up to the mic and identify yourself. So if people could do that going forward, that would be appreciated. I do have one more from, I'll go to you, Matt, in a second. Thomas Leschwiza, I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce that exactly. How can the town get safety precautions through to the Hispanic community? Seems to be a huge problem, both state and nationwide. Maybe I&M can do updates in Spanish. Matt, did you have your hand?
Just for clarification, we've had other groups meet. The landscaping group met with Jason and I. Some stuff came from them. The names weren't on it. I think the names can be gotten very easily. I think in a lot of this, the public has to realize that we're doing the best we can. We're not epidemiologists. We're not virologists. We're not infection disease doctors. Those are very specific, very specific knowledge, very specific skills. And that is what, and that's, so that we're doing the best we can, but we need people that have those skills.
Let's also make sure that any documents that came from landscapers and the Builders Association are also put out there publicly with names attached. Jason?
Just to clarify Matt's comment, I talked to just about every sector in different Zoom calls, from photographers to restaurants to landscapers, 4, 5, 6 weeks ago, and listened. And I didn't do anything with it, and I didn't come to the select board and put a report in. Or it was my job as listening to my constituents. So this is a little different because when those reports came out, Matt, that was when Jeff Carlson came in and the town and everybody was involved. I just wanted to be clear on that. I did do that a lot.
Thank you, Matt.
Yeah, and Jay, it's not a cut on you, Jason, at all. It's more consistency. I'm completely fine with everything you did. I just feel like there's sort of a double standard happening to this group, and partly because it's information that we don't want to hear, and that is very, it's hard for me to hear. And so I just think that we should be treating them as well as we treated everybody else. They've done us a great service, even if we don't know it.
Okay, I mean, any reports that are being submitted from any of these sectors should have identifiable things attached. Rita?
I just want to say that, this is all happening very quickly. I appreciate all the work everyone has done reaching out to stakeholders, and that information is invaluable. I think we should incorporate it and use it when and where we can, and just continue to try and find the process, the consistency, and the transparency in all of this. And I think we're starting to get there. But yeah, I don't think I don't think any of it should be taken personally by any board members. Everyone's worked really hard. We just really need to have some kind of consistent approach in all of this. So, and I think we're getting closer. We're learning as we go.
Jason?
I'm sorry that I got to keep commenting on this, but I'm not taking it personal at all. This one was very different. This is a very big report that was coming from a department head, and we don't know who they were coming from, right? That's the difference here. So nothing was taken personal. This is serious, and listening to constituents is different than having a report that's modeling life and death situations.
Shall we move to town service status? Libby?
I already did that. Sorry. I know it was fascinating, but
I guess you roped that into PIO.
I did, yes, sorry.
And I was trying to follow all these public comments. We do still have, Christy.
When we move to the twice a week report, can we still get the boat numbers daily?
Sure.
Thanks.
We do, I believe, probably still have public comment open for anything that's not COVID-19 related. If there is anything, we can just leave that open for a few minutes. No additional new business. Approval of minutes from April 8th. And can we do payroll warrants and treasury warrants all as one?
Yep, so moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
I'll be doing this by roll call in the order in which I see you. Matt Fee. Christy Paula.
Aye.
Jason Bridges.
Aye.
Rita Higgins.
Sorry. Aye.
Don Holgate, aye. Citizen departmental requests. We have a request from the Department of Public Works to do nighttime line painting. This is, something that kind of keeps coming up to try and get some of these things done. Are there any questions, comments on that? It looks like Rob McNeil's here if we need him.
Can I move approval as long as they're wearing masks?
Is there a second?
Second.
By roll call vote. Matt Fee.
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella.
Aye.
Jason Bridges.
Aye.
Rita Higgins.
Aye.
And Don Holgate, aye. Thank you. Thanks for being here, Rob. I don't think there's any questions on what you're doing. Double thumbs up. Request for approval of execution of a discharge of mortgage held by Patricia Dew for property located at 18 Wood Hollow Road. Tucker Holland is here to describe this.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. Just quickly, as you've seen in the board packet, this is a request regarding a release from a mortgage that was put on in 2005 under an old CBDG program where monies were loaned in effect to folks who were doing rehabilitations so long as they remained a resident of the home. This program was originally administered by Housing Nantucket. It transferred to the town at one point. And so in this case, the mortgage is effectively set to expire in June. All of these mortgages had a 15-year life, and they basically were forgiven over time. So with just 1 month left on this one, the original resident still resides there. The reason for the request is their son, who is a year-round resident, would like to build his home on the property. And so this is another opportunity for a year-round home, not shy eligible, but a year-round home.
Are there any questions? Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor by roll call: Matt Fee,
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella,
Aye.
Jason Bridges,
Aye.
Rita Higgins,
Aye.
John Holgate, aye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Select board reports, committee reports. We've kind of covered most of it. Oh, Matt.
Yeah, only comment. I've had a couple different committees reach out to me and ask, how come we can't start, non-regulatory, how come we can't start meeting? Can we do it on Zoom? When can we start? And we don't need an answer tonight, but I think it's important that, if we're going to have a new normal, Zoom is going to be a new normal for some of these guys. So
I think there's been a lot of trouble with scheduling. Oh, Jason and then Erica.
Yeah, I like Matt. There might be a way. I would love to see Affordable Housing Trust and a lot of these get back with Zoom. If we can figure out a way to do some town paid accounts and then record it and then can put it online for people to watch just with a link. It can be in the cloud or some version of that. That way, maybe, doing the NCTV 18 thing is a lot, but maybe there's a way that we can figure it out with Zoom. So thanks.
Erica.
Sorry, the issue with that is that by recording it and then showing it later isn't allowing for public comment, and it's required under the open meeting law. So Affordable Housing Trust already has a meeting scheduled. They're actually having their first meeting tomorrow. CPC is also meeting. We have made a couple of exceptions for boards that are dealing with funding matters, like those two boards. We have it's been challenging. A lot of boards don't want to meet in the morning, and the evenings are held up by a lot of regulatory boards. And again, it's just a matter of the scheduling, getting everybody in, because it needs to be by Zoom. It needs to be by YouTube. A couple of committees have actually contacted me about meeting, and when they realized the complexity of it, have decided to wait until they can do it in person.
Jason.
I'm just trying to be creative here, Eric. I'm not trying to push back or anything. Is there a way that we could use Zoom and record it, and anybody who wants to attend the Affordable House Trust meeting, which is usually 3 or 4 people, so maybe there's 10, and the host could have control over, right? To make them muted, and then when public comment comes up, they can unmute them and kind of control it. Is that a way to do it without having to have the NCTV 18 involved? I don't mean right now, but maybe down the road.
Yep, that's definitely something to consider if we want to give our Zoom links out to the public, which we've been hesitant to do thus far. But we're looking into other ways to make this work.
Thank you.
I mean, I guess one I do have some public comments to read that have come in, but what are we thinking in terms of when we would start meeting in person again with some social distancing requirements? I mean, obviously after May 18th, but I mean, we're going to be talking about having some kind of a town meeting. I mean, are we thinking that we might start meeting in person in June? I mean, maybe we just don't know, but I thought I would put that out there, and how we're going to do it. Libby?
I think you're right. We just don't know. We need to have the gathering ban lifted, because that's partly why we're not meeting in person. That doesn't apply to town meeting, but we obviously need to figure out social distancing for town meeting whenever that is going to happen. Hopefully by June, we could at least start meeting in person. We might still have to do some remote, maybe it's 3 board members that are in the room and the rest are on camera, or it's a big enough room, we probably could all social distance apart, but perhaps there's less public allowed in, and they can watch and still do public comment somehow.
Okay.
We do need to start thinking about it. You're right.
I'm just going to go through the public comments right now, if that's okay. Thomas Barada, can Victor pave Prospect to the corner to fix that stretch that's just past the new curb to Atlantic Ave? The road is rutted. Erica?
That is actually part of the waiver that the board granted to the DPW a week or two ago, so that is in their schedule.
Thank you. Kind Flow Production, has the board made any decisions on the letter from the Concom regarding SBPF violations of their order of conditions? Kind Flow is Burton Ball Kind, correct? Asking that. And no, we have not gotten to that yet. We just got that on Friday. Raymond DaCosta, I understand these are tough decisions to make, but we have elected you all to make them. Also, please start writing up a briefing of what is happening after these meetings. Meg Browers, if there is an ad hoc COVID resiliency group giving advisory commentary to the SB, it should be public so the public can at a bare minimum be giving them input as well. Raymond DaCosta, 3 hours of back and forth is very hard to follow, and it would greatly help if the main points were easily accessible. That is all. And most of those weren't questions. Is there a motion to adjourn? And we've covered this whole agenda, and I think the things that were on Friday. So
wait, we skipped the town manager's section.
Oh my gosh, I'm sorry, Libby. I'm just skipping you off.
I'm not offended. So I'll try to be quick though and get through it. First off, we have some license and permit extensions. So we've asked all the departments to go through their, oh, sorry, Christy, were you going to say something?
If we're going to group it all together, I have to recuse for the taxi part.
Okay.
So I don't know if you're going to go.
Well, you guys could break it apart if you want. You could do taxi separately.
Okay.
If you wanted to.
Yeah, why don't you go through it and we'll take that as a separate vote?
Okay, so we asked all the departments to go through the licenses and permits that they issue out of their departments and see if any should be extended for a particular reason. So this chart is all of the ones we came up with that we felt potentially should be extended. So junk dealer, I'll just quickly say them. This is issued from the town clerk's office. The expiration date is May 1st. We recommend extending to June 15th. No financial impact. Taxi, charter, tour, and limo licenses. This gets slightly tricky, but basically these licenses expire May 31st, and there's a period of time for renewal. Oh, thank you, Erica. There's a period of time for renewal. So our recommendation is to extend that to June 30th. And for taxis in particular, to waive the requirement that taxis must be on the road for this summer. We did recommend that they still pay for and acquire the actual license. I saw that there was an email today requesting perhaps a waiver of half of that fee or all of the fee. I mean, that's up to the board. I don't think we'll mind too much about that, but people still need to get the actual license so that we can have it documented that they got it. There's a wait list for those licenses and a fingerprint requirement that kind of has to be waived anyway because of social distancing issues. Fuel storage registrations is simply just extending the annual registration to June 15th. Seasonal licensing. Licensing seasonal liquor. Amy, I would turn that one over to you.
Okay, thank you. The recommendation for seasonal liquor licenses, again, we have a total of 99 liquor licenses across the board. Half of those are seasonal. The recommendation is for the on-premise licenses to be at the same level as annuals. If you remember, we did an increase in November that went through, and the annuals did pay that increase, and that increase increased the seasonal rate much above the annuals. So because we had a delay in actually allowing them to open, and with what's going on, we thought it would be fair that everyone, all the on-premises, were paying the same rate across the board. So this would be asking for the seasonals to pay, and it's on-premise only. The package stores were able to open, so they paid their usual rate, but it's to allow that kind of fairness across the board. And per license, you're looking at, depending on the category, maybe $500 to $800 difference in what they would pay, and we're already on an increase over last year. So we indicated if we did do that for all those licenses, the impact would be $60,000. But again, that is considering the increased rate from last year already.
Question for you. With so much uncertainty in all of these restaurants, annual included, what kind of impact would it be if we didn't charge any liquor licenses this year, including refunding the annuals?
You know what? I don't have. I can look that up and come back to what that number is. But it's obviously, you're looking at just decreasing this one thing is 60,000. It's several hundred thousand. I need to look that number up for you, and I will give that to you. We also have the case, aside from that, if we were to go to this, that there have been several requests. They don't know yet, but when they see what comes down from the state, it might not be worth it for some folks to open. And they're considering that right now, and what would be our action as far as allowing them to put a hold and go next year, which, I think we should be open to, and not charge the fee, at the very least in those situations, if they choose to not open. So I'll just look up right now to get you that final number.
Does anybody have any thoughts on that? I would definitely be fine with extending people's licenses into next year and not having them have any implications of losing a license. But other board members, I can't see you all, unfortunately, because of this screen.
Hit gallery view.
It still doesn't show me everybody. I'll try. Yeah, I still can't see everybody unless I scroll through, but okay, I'm scrolling through. I don't see anybody's hands up. Do you guys want more information on license? Jason?
Are we looking for votes tonight or more direction? I can give you my thoughts now and we can vote.
Whatever the board wants to do. These are our recommendations. So, you could vote now or next week.
Jason, you want to give your thoughts?
Yeah, I like the not increasing the liquor licenses. $500 to $800 is something to the businesses. So I think that's good. I'm not sure about waiving all of that until we have a number. Maybe it's 400,000, maybe it's 200. And then we also got to think about all of this combined. What's the total amount? I'm fine with all of it. The annual taxi license, is that $300? Yeah.
Yeah, and that I will refer to Nancy Holmes on those licenses they issue out of the town clerks, but yes.
Block, but it's $300 for a taxi license.
I would suggest to the board maybe doing 50% of that, if they are some percentage. If other board members like that, everything else I'm fine with.
I think they requested 50%. I'm personally fine with all of this. I just thought we might want to consider other relief to restaurants and, maybe something to the annuals, because they got shut down before the real start of their season too, even though they were allowed to be open in the winter. And we'll see as state guidance comes in, what kind of relief they might need.
I see Christy has her hand up. I wanted to.
Sorry, I just can't see everybody.
That's okay. Yeah, I was just going to say that I'm in favor of delaying the rate increase. And then also if Amy could come back and tell us kind of what the financial impact would be of kind of waiving or even reducing fees for all businesses. I think what we're all hearing is that, federal relief is not helping our restaurants or really any industry on Nantucket. So anything that we can do to provide relief with obviously not running the town budget into the ground is important.
Yeah, I'll come back with that also. They are able to use their liquor license to some extent right now, but it's just beer and wine. Those that have full liquor licenses, obviously they aren't able to use those right now. So even if we came with a straight across the board for that as well, but I will research that for you and get back to you.
Thank you. Do we want to take votes, pulling taxis out of it? Do we want to authorize these things to happen? All except for taxis, and then we'll take that vote separately.
So moved.
Erica, can you take it off so I can see everybody? Thanks. Oh, Amy?
If you're going to vote on taxi, I was going to add the one thing that we handle with taxi, charter, tour, and limos is a wait list that also happens in this time of year. We have a $10 fee that we usually do to keep on the wait list, just to keep it in compliance. And we have requested to waive that. We can move it all online, make sure everyone keeps their place and gets registered on that wait list. It's maybe a total of 90 to 95 $10 fees to keep on the wait list. So if we can include that in that vote and extend it to the end of June as well to match what the taxis are doing.
Okay, we'll do the taxi separate, but I think I'm not seeing anyone say don't include that.
I'll make a motion to approve all recommendations, so the relief of these fees, except the taxis.
Matt, sorry, we seconded. So, okay, by roll call, Matt Fee?
Yes.
Christy Ferrantella?
Yes.
Jason Bridges?
Aye.
Rita Higgins?
Aye.
John Holgate, aye. And then Christy will be recusing. Can we have another motion on the taxi and charter fees?
I'd make a motion to accept the recommendations.
Second.
All those in favor by roll call, Matt Fee?
Aye.
Jason Bridges?
Aye.
Rita Higgins?
Aye.
John Holgate, aye. Was there anything? Oh, Nancy, sorry.
Just a quick question. Was that vote on the taxis to allow them a 50% if they choose not to put their vehicle on the road for 21?
I thought that it was. Is that not correct?
That's what I thought too.
Mm-hmm. I thought that was the recommendation.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Of course, if they decide to put it on the road, then they need to produce all the necessary documentation and everything like that.
Jason?
I just want to make sure that we get this information out well to everybody of some of the things that the town's doing to have some relief to our businesses. I think it's just good for people to know that we're thinking about it.
We have one public comment that came in on the taxis. To get a taxi license on ACT, proof of insurance and registration needs to be proven, though this is Michael Marsandres. Insurance can be $6,000 or more. Some drivers do not want to drive this season. So, Nancy?
Yeah, I think that's the purpose of why this has been proposed, because Libby also got some letters and I got some calls. There are some drivers that don't want to drive. So paying this 50% fee for their license will essentially be a placeholder till 2021. And hopefully maybe it'll give those that do drive, a little bit more business.
But so, I mean, in theory, they wouldn't need that proof of insurance. They could redo that vehicle for just to be a normal insurance. Not an insurance to transfer passengers, or
if they were not going to use it for a taxi, they just have to use it like any other regular car. But
so they could change their insurance if they're not going to use it for a taxi. Okay, I think that was the question, right? Okay. Is there anything further? Did I miss anything? I need to print out these agendas, and I didn't have a chance to today. Rita?
I just wanted to make one last comment that there's also actsaves.org. You mentioned earlier people struggling to put food on the table, and I think we've got a lot of organizations helping, but actsaves.org is a new one. So just want to make sure anyone watching knows about that and that we spread the word.
Thanks. Christy, did you have your hand up as well? Oh, I thought you did. Sorry. Did I?
So there's,
oh, sorry.
There's a couple other items in this recommendation. Concession lease terms recommendations, and Erica, I'm sorry, but I don't see it in the packet. I don't know if it made it in there or not.
You told me only to put that one thing in there. I guess I was confused.
Yeah, well, we were working on the AIS sheet, but late, so I guess maybe it didn't get to you.
No.
And I am not going to be able to do this one without Greg.
Do you want to push this over? Or
I think unless he comes on here, I think we could push it over till next week so that you probably need to see the they need to see the sheet, and it's not in the packet.
It was in the first packet, the AIS.
I don't have it in my packet. Does anybody have it in their packet?
No. It is not in the packet.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, so we can push that one to next week. Events, we wanted to just have a bit of discussion. I don't know if Amy wants to talk about that. There is, again, a waiting game with events overall, with the state guidance again, and whether or not they're going to be able to happen, when they're going to be able to happen. But I think we wanted to talk about it from a conceptual kind of a discussion with what our resources might be to handle events in any event, because we're going to have less summer officers this summer.
Right. So, as we went into this, we put out some language as far as how we were going to handle event permits, things on public property and that sort of thing. At the time, obviously didn't know how long this was going to last. So kind of how we approached it is I know the word cancel was out there. We didn't cancel things. We were kind of working with groups and allowing them to work through what was going on. Obviously, this far into it, all these big festivals and things of that sort are not going on as planned. Some things that can postpone film festival and things of that are waiting to see kind of how things go. The conversation we're having is that we can't officially permit anything until we live in a world that allows for whatever this is. If they're having 50 people, 100 people, we can't really officially permit. And even at that time, we have to understand things can shift again at the last minute. So as far as a status for everything right now, we kind of go off our main events that are on public property and such. Obviously Daffodil, hoping to maybe have some elements of that at another time if we can. Wine Festival, would like to do small types of events if they can in the fall. These are things behind the scenes they're trying to work out. Basically, the conversation is how long can you wait until you make a final decision? That's kind of how we've been going with that. Fagawi obviously canceled. Triathlon I spoke with this week, and they obviously know they can't move forward in that type of event. Those types of events are not happening. I think once the Pops and the hospital announced their plans, that's how that happens. So basically through the summer, these large events are not happening. Private events and things of that sort, the conversation is just how long can you wait in your internal timeline to cancel things, or how do you make it socially distant? And if you have occupancy reductions, we know what the basic things are going to come down, but again, folks are kind of trying to wait it out. So that's kind of the conversation we've been having for that. So is there any specific questions? I can go on forever as far as events and how we're handling that. Anybody know? We're all good. Again, we're having the conversation every day with folks. So hopefully we have a lot of things. One thing, if I can address, I know there was comments last week in the paper and otherwise, as far as some things, drive-ins, things that are happening. I just want to assure folks that a lot of details got out about certain things. People are excited to try to offer some alternative for folks this summer, and we're working on those. But I assure everyone that anything of that sort, those details will come before the board. They will come, in public, I'm forgetting the word now already, public hearings. So I just wanted to assure those folks that were concerned that something had been approved when it hasn't. We're still in the discussion, and we're still going to be very thoughtful about how we move forward and involving the community in those things. So I just wanted to assure folks that that is still happening, and they will hear it here once final plans are put into place and that we can actually discuss it.
Thank you. Oh, Matt, then Christy.
Right. So how I look at this, it's sort of, I think there's going to be few businesses that are thinking of opening. We have fewer people. We're scaling back what we do. I think the town may have to think about that too. My wife Sheila has talked about this summer being sort of, planning it to be in, old Nantucket. And old Nantucket didn't have a lot of events. We had, the county fair and the Redmonds parade and Memorial Day. There, 4th of July, that was about it. And, we may be going back to that for this season, and that isn't necessarily a bad thing. So,
Christy, you want to?
Sorry. Yeah, I was just going to say, I know that we've gotten a lot of questions about kind of tents and events at private property. And I think most of that, I know most of that's going to come from the governor. And so just once we have those kind of guidelines, making sure that we get the information out kind of as clearly and consistently as possible.
If I can, I'll respond. I know we've been getting that question a lot too. And I think what's happening is something I think we have to talk with Plus and stuff, because they certainly manage tent permitting, and the restriction on private homes, I believe, is 3 or 72 hours. There's restrictions, obviously, on the number of days you can have a tent in a private home. And what's happening is weddings and things of that sort, they want to move them to 2021. A lot of them realize it's not worth it to even sit here and wait for 2020. So can I move my wedding to 2021? Okay, well, this private home already has 3 weddings already set for 2021 because people plan ahead. So can we now have 6? So those are the discussions I think that are happening that we need to have and understand and discuss, because that becomes a business in a private neighborhood. So that's kind of where that discussion is coming. And I think a lot of people also believe that tents will allow them to have events because it's outside and it spreads it out. So the tent question is coming up a lot right now as far as how that's going to be dealt with. But again, Plus and building really need to be involved in that discussion.
Thank you. Oh, Matt.
I can't help myself. It's more than Plus that we have to make sure that the epidemiologists and scientists are involved too. Any enclosed spaces are enclosed spaces. Any amount of people together is, that's not a good thing. And so, I just think we better not jump the gun and encourage something that, we will regret later. So, it's not just a Plus or an enforcement issue or a regulation, and we've got to make sure that that's part of it.
Okay. And yeah, I think there's a lot more coming with trying to figure this all out. And state guidance of when more than 10 people will be able to be together is a big piece of it. Do we need to talk about anything else tonight? We're going to do the fireworks next week. Is that right? Okay.
Yeah, we have that on for next week.
Okay, Jason?
Just clarifying, this select board meeting on Friday, we're not having now? Okay.
I think we got through everything between the 2 meetings today.
I thought we added one item to Friday's agenda that wasn't on tonight.
Oh, sorry, Erica, what was that again?
It was the about the data analysis.
That's the thing we're not doing.
Yeah, because the Board of Health apparently talked about that significantly today, is what I'm hearing.
Okay, so then I can cancel Friday's meeting.
Yes. There's nothing because we got through the whole agenda. Anything else? I got through everything now, right? I'll make sure I print it for the next week.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor by roll call, as I see you, Matt Fee.
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella.
Aye.
Jason Bridges.
Aye.
Rita Higgins.
Aye.
John Holgate. Aye. Thanks, everyone.